going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke with our DFS and Prop live stream for round 4 of the Worldwide Technology Championship. Gonna get you ready for all your Sunday exposure. We'll look at the weather report out there for tomorrow's action. Also, some ownership at the top end of the pricing. We'll go through some strategy, lineup construction, how to build your player pool for DFS, as well as some stat averages for underdog and prize picks props to help you out with that exposure as well. So we'll go through the PGA slate, also the DP World Tour averages, any questions or player deep dives that you have if you're here in the live chat. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing going. And we had Jose in here earlier talking about the Andrew Putnam ace. Always cool to see that, but it does make me wonder when I'm going to get one for myself. So maybe one of these days we'll be celebrating together when I finally get that job done. But let's go ahead and get this thing going. So first things first, scoring average today was about -3. And although we look at the first versus the second half, it looks like there was a 0.9 shot advantage. That's just due to the kind of distribution of tee times. Of course, your more informed players were the ones that were going off later. You also had the players that just hardly made the cut that were going off later, but it wasn't conditions based. This was just purely based on the actual form and the kind of talent level you had with those top level players, not so much something that we have to worry about for tomorrow. And because it is threesomes off of both 1 and 10 again, it's not going to be a massive part of our process. But to take a look at the Sunday weather, it looks extremely favorable for scoring, less than about 5 to 6 miles an hour of sustained wind the entire day. Wind gusts are also in that single digit range the entire day as well on top of that. So scoring wise, it should play probably even easier than what we had for today, because if you guys saw what happened at hole 15, it was an absolute bloodbath. In fact, it played 0.77 strokes over par for moving day, which was about a stroke difference compared to the first couple rounds. You can see for round 2 played 0.15 under. Round number 1, I guess not quite an entire stroke difference, but 0.13 strokes under par. That's a 0.8 to a 0.9 stroke difference from day to day. So that's going to be a big part of that scoring average change from round 3 to round 4. But there will be some slightly tucked pins because it is a Sunday slate as opposed to moving day. Perhaps a tee box that's moved back as well. So it's not all going to be things that are, easier, all things that are going to be harder. But I would say about a -3.5 scoring average could be projected. So that's important to note, not so much from stacking one side to the other, but from the importance of placement points. And Sunday's slate is a little bit different than what we had for rounds 2 and 3. We don't have to worry about where a player's starting. Sunday, you get points for finishing in first, second, third. Some of those top 5, top 10 finishers are getting a pretty significant boost on top of their score. It's not the end all be all though, when we have scoring like we're projecting. If it's going to play to -3, -3.5, we're going to get some mid to early starters, which in the case of tomorrow is going to be the middle of the board. Those are going to be your first tee times that are going off. And that's not going to be advantageous in terms of your conditions, but those players are going to be significantly lower owned than the players that we have at the top end of the board. And while that's for a reason, those placement points are why they're getting the extra steam, and they should be higher owned than a lot of their peers. Don't be afraid to go to some of the players that are a little bit overlooked, especially at a birdie fest like this. So that's why the weather's important to check. For example, if it was going to be extremely windy tomorrow, we'd be prioritizing the placement points a little bit more, but that's not the case. It's not like we're at Sunday at Oakmont where it's going to play +3 or +4, and your raw scoring might be 25 to 30 points at most at a golf course like that. Tomorrow, we're going to have people that get 55 to 65 raw point performances. And if you get one of those going off, even if it's Luke List at the complete bottom end of the board, 0 placement point potential, if he shoots -7 tomorrow and it's like an 8-9 birdie round, you're going to have that in your showdown lineup. So I just think it's important to kind of have your perspective set straight and to know what you need for those optimal lineups. Before we start talking about actually building a pool, let's go through the ownership at the very top. And these is going to be the top 10 highest owned players that we have for round 4. And round 2 and 3, you already saw a bias on the players that were playing well, but just like the placement points lead to more steam and people favoring those players overall, you're going to see that reflected with the GPP ownership. So for example, Garrett Kigo, he's your current leader. Course, outright bet this week, so I hope he can hold on at -22. He's 36.9% owned, so you're going to have to pay for it if you want to take that stud. Ben Griffin, also an outright bet of ours, so I'm liking our spot heading into Sunday. I'm hoping one of those two can close the door and cash us out from that perspective, but he's going to be nearly 30% owned, even though he's almost 12 grand. That price tag is a little bit eye-popping. Is significantly more expensive than I thought he was going to be for the Sunday slate. JJ Spawn getting some exposure, but look what we have here. We've got some 7K guys, unlike the last couple of days, that did crack that top 10 of the ownership. And it's because of the placement points, people trying to really jam those into lineups. A Carson Young at -21, a Velimaki at -19 is extremely popular, but a Dunlap, a Ramey, who are 15, 16% owned respectively, are getting that steam because of the situation that we have for Sunday. So you need some of these guys in lineups. I'd say especially like the 9, 10K options, like your Griffins, your Higos. If you want to play them, then no worries tomorrow. Like that ownership really shouldn't be that big of a deal if you're using those sort of players. Where you start to think about it a little bit more, and it's more of an actual decision on whether to use these players or not. Because if you're a 150 max player, or even if you only have like 50 lineups, you should have most of the studs that are playing at the top end of the board. That's at least my personal take when playing a Sunday showdown slate like this. I don't think you have to get cute with those players. They're the studs for a reason, and they're in prime position most of the time if they're getting that kind of ownership. But these guys that are a bit more inexperienced, that are more inconsistent, guys that lose strokes on average to the PGA Tour, they're very sketchy to want to use in 35 to 40% of your lineups. And I have 15, 16% ownership on some of them, but sometimes these guys get steamed to like 20 to 25%. And for example, Carson Young, especially at -21, just one shot off the lead, in some single entries, he might be 30% owned tomorrow. You've got to ask yourself, a single entry, you've got to commit all in or not in that sort of a format. But let's say a 20 max, where maybe he's closer to 25% ownership. If you want to get leverage in that sort of a contest, you're committing to at least 40% of your builds at just using the 18% mark that we have right there, if not closer to 50 to 55% of your builds, to ensure that you're getting double the field on them. And, you know, if it was a Rico Hoey that you were doing that with, or a Spawn or a Ben Griffin, it's still going to be uncomfortable because it's over half your portfolio, but it's a little bit easier to stomach when it's one of the top 5 players that we have teeing it up. Not so much when it's Carson Young, not to, talk too much smack on the Young last name. Cam Young has really come into his own over the last 3 or 4 months, but Carson Young just isn't that guy at this point. So I'll be hoping that he doesn't go off tomorrow. Personally, I don't expect the most from him on Sunday. He's one of those guys that hasn't been in this situation that often before. And that's the other aspect of this. The guys that are in the 9, 10K range, for the most part, if they haven't won before, they've at least been in contention a couple of times over the last couple of seasons. That's not the case with a lot of these 7K players. So Velimaki, he was in contention a couple weeks back and finished in second. So maybe not so much him, but like your Ramies, your Dunlap hasn't been in contention for like a year at this point. It's a little bit sketchy with some of those players. And of course, the spreadsheet is from my Patreon page. So if you guys go to the Golf DFS tier, you guys can find access to these spreadsheets for yourself. On there, I've got every single player projected, also my entire player pool. And speaking of the player pool, this is what I'm using to build it for tomorrow. And it's very similar to the last couple of days where we don't have the shot link data to work with. Shot link data is normally one of the key cornerstones of our analysis here, where we can try and find players that are, kind of trending the right direction heading into the next day, normally looking for ball striking and trying to fade guys that were hot with the short game. But we don't have that this week. So we've been relying on some course history, high upside players, guys that make a lot of birdies. Also looking at past palm putting. That's the type of greens that we have at El Cardonal. But because it's Sunday, we have to add this extra tag on there to target some of the top end of the board. And when I'm building my lineups, we'll do the lineup construction segment here as well. I went 2 to 4 players that have placement point potential. And on the flip side, I went 2 to 4 players that are pivots in my lineups. And the reason why we've got a pretty big range for both sides of that is it depends on the kind of contest you're entering. If you're in a large show GPP, you might want 4 pivots and then 2 guys at the top. You might really force your hand and get different when you're playing against a whole bunch of other entries. Whereas if you're in a single entry or a cash lineup, at most, you probably want 2 pivots in your lineup. You might want 4 guys towards the top, even 5 in a cash lineup, really prioritizing those placement points. Single entry might not be as extreme. Maybe it's like 3 or 4 players at the top that you're using, but that's why I have that sliding scale on it. And these placement point players are players that are starting in the top 10 that have a chance of getting us that top 3 to top 5 finishing position. So, some of them are pretty obvious, like Garrett Kigo, for example, Ben Griffin. Like some of the studs I'm just using at the top. I think it just makes sense, even though I have that exposure for main slate. I'm not being an absolute bitch and going out there and self-hedging. I know a lot of people like doing that, but in my opinion, you're bitch made if that's your strategy for Sunday Showdown. You just don't have any conviction in yourself if that's the kind of strategy that you're taking. So yeah, the placement point tag added on top of the other three categories that we had for the first couple days, but it's a little bit different than what we typically have here. Normally, shots gained metrics really able to be leaned into, not so much this week. What's going on, Phil? You said you were in 5th place in the big GPP today and fell to 49th. Do you still have a chance? Yeah, man, top 50 for sure has a chance to take down GPPs. I mean, I've come roaring back from about 1,000th before to near winning a contest before. The most I've ever come to in actually winning a GPP is probably closer to like 500, 600. But at 49th, you're well within that sort of outcome. I guess it depends on how many entries there are on the contest because, 49th in one contest is, vastly different than 49th in another. If it has 200,000 entries, you're in the top 0.01 percentile of the contest. Whereas if it's only a couple thousand entries, it's a bit different. But yeah, I'm assuming that you're in a pretty decent spot, I'd say, to take down that GPP. If not to win first place, crack that top 5, top 10, get to a decent payout. And I wish you the best of luck, Phil, with your endeavors there tomorrow. Let's go through some prop stuff now. So we mostly talked through everything on the DFS side. The last thing I'll say on that is, especially with the lineup construction, is in the large field GPPs, because the weather is so damn good. I mean, look at the scoring averages here, -3, over a 5 birdie average. Don't be afraid to play the pivots. Don't be afraid to take some lower end guys that are going off earlier, especially if they're studs. People that have been playing really well over the last 6 months, so some of the best players that we have in the field, it's a birdie fest. Sometimes you don't get the hot putter going right through, your first 54 holes. You might only be like -8, -9, something like that. And there are a lot of studs, and I'll throw a few examples out there, like a Jacob Bridgman, a Matt Wallace. There's a lot of just legit good players that didn't have their fastball this week that you can play at half to even a third of the ownership of some of the chalk around them. And, you need the chalk in a couple spots. We've talked about that multiple times at this point, but those pivot plays are where you're actually going to win and lose the GPP. So because of these conditions, I think that should be even more so considered there. And just to kind of go back on that, some of the really good options to use for that, not so much the placement point guys at the top, right? We need to get different, get more creative with those sort of players. Course history at El Cardonal, it's a really good category to use for that. High upside, just the players that make a whole crap ton of birdies. We need birdie or better firepower to be the absolute nuts. That's a good way to go after that too. And then pass ball and putting. If you're going to shoot someone like -7, -8, you've got to make a lot of putts. So why not look at the guys that have had a lot of success on pass pollen before? So let's go through the stat averages now. So we don't actually have the full boards to go through. It looks like Prize Picks just posted there, so we'll be able to actually go through that here. And it looks like they have some better players posted, so I'm actually pretty stoked about that, because if not, the stuff they had on Underdog was complete dog shit. And in fact, I don't see anything on Underdog that I want to play, so good on them for getting that board up. We had to delay the live stream an hour to make sure that we'd have these boards to go through, but I want to make sure that we have a community tail to go through. So first off, scoring average was -3, but I have a hot take on tomorrow. This hole 15 is a really, really big deal. I do think that one might be slightly harder. It's not going to play over a stroke under par because the pin location is not going to be in a bowl like what it was for today. Hole 10, I can't confirm or deny this because we weren't able to see it on the broadcast, and they, of course, don't have shot link. So we weren't able to see it on the shot trails, but I assume they moved up the tee box at 10. Because if we take a look at 1 and 2, the first rounds, it played about 0.1 under. Then the second day, it played 0.3 under. Today, it played 0.6 under par. It was the second easiest hole that you had on the golf course. I think that's going to get harder too. 1 and 10, the two first holes will probably be the biggest difference. But going from plus 0.77 to, I would guess, I haven't seen the pin location yet. It's not going to be in the same spot. There's just no way. If they do it, that sucks for the players. They have to deal with, it's not even a fair pin. I don't know if they did show that one on the broadcast. It was in the back left corner, and any miss of the left of that green, it goes into a hazard. So what players were doing is they were just bailing out to the right, and then even the 2-putt was hard because of the slope that you have in the back left of that green. My thoughts are is that Tiger is going to see that and then probably change up the golf course at some point, because that pin location isn't even usable for you and me. I mean, we'd make probably a 20 on it if we tried, if you weren't really careful about that slope. But you had Luke List today, who I promise you is not a terrible player. He's won before on tour, I think even multiple times. He made a 12 on hole 15. And it's not just the 12 that caused the scoring average to be plus 0.77. Look at the double bogeys or worse. It was 19% on that hole, 20% bogey or worse rate. And that was because of the amount of 3 putts that you saw at 15. Like it's not a long hole. It's like 450 and it plays shorter because of the firm and fast fairways. So it's like a 440-yard hole with a wide open fairway. It's like 60 yards wide. It's all about that shot into the green and that hazard just to the left of it. So we'll see what they do with the pin location. As long as it's not in that very back left nook again, that's like a 0.8 shot advantage there. I mean, literally at least 0.8, maybe 0.9 shots to an entire stroke difference from round to round on one single hole. So though there might be like a 0.2 shot difference there, another like 0.2 shot difference here, moving day setup in general might be easier on a couple other spots. All of that, I think, plus more is going to be made up for from this whole number 15 thing. So scoring average, I have it closer to minus 3.5, actually about a half a stroke easier than moving day, which again would surprise most people. But you've got to look at the averages in the specific holes and know that 15 is going to be a really big jump from round to round. Birdie or better average, I don't think will move as much. That'll probably still be like 5.35 per round. It might even be the exact same from day to day. This bogey or worse average is where the bigger difference is going to come in. And it might be like a 0.2 difference. It might go down to like 1.8 bogeys or worse per round. But the double bogey average as part of that 0.2 difference is going to be almost all of that difference from round to round. So it's going to be a lot less of a ticking time bomb for players. Not going to see nearly as many blow-up holes there. Into accounting for the Big 12 outlier, some of the other blow-ups that we had at 15, the actual true scoring average today was like minus 3.75. So I think that's probably a better number to look at. But just know that the birdie average wasn't that impacted by it. Like the birdie average, just to go back to like the first couple days, what was it at 15? It was that's actually pretty healthy, 34%. Let's look at round one. Round one, it was 27%. So it might go up by like 0.2 to 0.25 on that hole. But remember, holes 1 pin's probably going to be a little bit harder. Same thing with 10. They might move back that tee box. So that's why I don't think the birdie average is going to be impacted very much there. And I'll just go through the underdog board real quickly because I already know what they have on here. A whole bunch of dog shit players. And I do think the scoring average might be around minus 3.5. That's 68.5 strokes, by the way, for anyone that wants to know. It's a par 72 setup. But look at this absolute horseshit of players we have on here. Like Carson Young, he's streets towards the over. Even if he was even money, no thank you. It's just like Chad Ramey's absolute horseshit. Patrick Rogers has been terrible for like 4 months. Sammy Valimaki to shoot -4. Like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing these absolutely terrible golf. And I hate to call them terrible golfers because on the PGA Tour, they're some of the best golfers in the world, no doubt about it. But compared to Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, some of these other guys that we get spoiled with when playing on a weekly basis that we know are better than average, that consistently are playing some really good golf. These other guys, we never really know what we're getting from them. Like a Taylor Moore. You don't want to play him to shoot -4. Like you'd be crazy to want to back that sort of thing. So when I saw this board, especially with the kind of multipliers that they had on Underdog, I just said, no, thank you. There was just no chance in hell that I was going to play that. What I was hoping for was Prize Picks to post some actual golfers at 68.5. And it kind of looks like they have. I don't want to completely jinx it, but at the top end of the board, there looks like a few slightly usable players that we could take at that number. And in fact, as we go further down the board here, it looks like that is going to be the case. And with them changing hole 15 and making it a lot more scoreable, I'm not against taking guys to shoot -4. Again, shooting is 68, as long as they're a half-decent player. And looking at the birdie or better list, they've also got some half-decent players at 5.5 birdies. I was not expecting them to go that direction because when we take a look at the sportsbook odds, they look, they're all juiced towards the over, like 5.5 birdies. And it's not even all like your stud players that they have at that sort of projection. So in fact, let me actually bring up Draftkings real quick. I want to do a little bit of line shopping on some of the players that might be on the board. Just like Underdog, they didn't have a whole bunch of players actually posted, which is disappointing, but it's the fall swing. It's Saturday. I guess their lines makers are out doing their Saturday night festivities or whatnot. But let's see what we can grind out here for some value. So at 5.5, a few of the players that kind of stuck out, I wanted to look at Cootie, maybe a Thorbjorn Olesen to see if either of those two players had a line, but I'm assuming that they don't. So Cootie, does not have a line to compare to. Let's see if Olesen does. Probably not, huh? Olesen does, and he's at 6.5 birdies. So I know he's not at 5.5. We don't have the actual line for comparison, but you would have to think they'd probably be juiced towards the over, even though he's at 6.5 and juiced towards the under. Let's see. Mitchell's probably not going to have a line, but let's see if Mitchell or Grillo do, just in case. Mitchell didn't have one the day before. Mitchell, nothing posted. Mitchell, by the way, cashed us out on our 2-man from the day before. So hopefully you guys were able to take advantage of that yourself. Little 3x cash there with him. And then Elvis Smiley under on strokes. We could go back to him for Sunday. Like, I don't think the birdie average is going to move very much. And obviously, if you liked him the day before, he cashed out for us and he has cashed for all 3 rounds so far. Maybe that one's not a terrible one to mix in either. But he's a top-level birdie guy. Thorburn Olesen, I believe he's a top 50 birdie percentage player that we have on the PGA Tour. Could be some leans there. Even a Pearson Coody, he's an aggressive birdie maker that I would imagine would make more birdies than your average player. And then we've got these strokes lines here too. If I think the scoring average is going to be like -3.5, shooting -4 and going under 60.5 is just being a little bit better than average. You know what? Let's start pointing out a few. So an Echeverria has been a lot better than average over the last 6 months. In fact, he's been gaining about a half a stroke per round over that sample size. And that's not just the fall swing. That includes a lot of legit events, including major championships here in 2025. And Echeverria has been a gainer over all of those fields over the last 6 months. So I like the idea of that one. Bridgman doesn't have as elite of shots gained stats over that stretch, but he's been playing in top tier fields and he's been a gainer over the last 6 months. So like, he's another guy that I kind of got my side eye on. Grillo, I played him today for an under at 68.5 and he did not hit. He only shot -3. Obviously didn't have the shot trails or anything, but I imagine it's because he wasn't making any putts. I was seeing a lot of third strokes from the green and then fourth for par that were being made. So he could also be a potential under. I'm not going to hold that against him too much. Again, he hooked by 0.5 anyways, and the course setup in theory was harder than what's going to be for tomorrow. Staying away from Luke List, by the way. I haven't confirmed this. I'm going to see if maybe I can find some information on it tonight. I think he's hurt. The thing today wasn't from him being hurt, but if you take a look at his driving distance over the last couple months, it has gone down severely from what it was before. And if you know Luke List, you know him as maybe the longest player that we have on the PGA Tour. Last couple months, he's been losing distance off the tee. So I'm personally going to be staying away from Luke List until I get confirmation on that or not, because based on some of the stuff at the Pro Core, the event before that too, he was losing like 10 yards off the tee. That's just not like Luke List and not what we're used to seeing. But yeah, these could be two unders on strokes to consider, two players that should be above average. Let's go to Coody with birdies. That's somebody to throw in the shopping cart to at least throw in the back of our mind. Olesen, we could go back to Keith Mitchell at 5.5. I know we mentioned that one a little bit earlier. And just to show you guys some of these lines on it, like if we go down to a Nick Dunlop, for example, I mean, I know he's a good birdie maker and whatnot, but he's not been playing the most consistent golf. He's -175 towards the over. So you would have to think that some of these like legit players that we have at 5.5 birdies would be severely juiced towards the over. So I wish we had an Echeverria at 5.5. I would slightly prefer to go that direction, kind of like what we have there on Coody and Olesen. The other thing I want to bring up real quick, 1 second here. So we'll bring up the PGA Tour website. I wanted to get out of here in 15 minutes at 9:15, but we've already gone overtime. But you know what? We've committed to the bid at this point. I want to make sure that we have a good piece of exposure to tail together. So let's do this. So there's Mitchell at number 10. This is the birdie or better percentage list. I feel like that one's going to be a part of our slip, especially because he cashed us out and respected the coin so much today. But let's see where these other guys rank out. So Olesen's number 53. Yeah, I thought he was top 50. He's just outside of that. Coody doesn't qualify for the rankings because he's from the Korn Ferry Tour, and that's where he's played a majority of his golf. So we can't look at shots gained over the last 6 months on the PGA Tour website. I'd have to bring that up on my database. But over that stretch, I can just give you the numbers on Echeverria. I remember it was about 0.65 shots gained per round over the last 6 months. And Grillo was like 0.92 shots gained per round over the last 6 months. So the scoring average is going to be -3.5. These guys are gaining well over a half a stroke per round over that big of a sample size. especially in a weaker field event like this. This isn't a major championship. This isn't even just like a regular tour event this week. This is a much weaker than normal tour event in terms of field strength. These guys are going to gain more than their baselines at this sort of a field. So I think I like all 5 of these, and we're not going to play them all together because, I mean, look at the rat shit payout. It's a 5x payout. We're probably just going to pick our favorite 2 and run that as a 2-man, but there's a good chance that I'm playing all of these 5 props that I've got pointed out here. So Patreon page is where I'm going to be posting every single slip as I actually enter them myself, with all the full research, the full projections behind it included with those posts. But let's really narrow this down here. So I'm very tempted to go Cootie because he's just an aggressive, very long player off the tee, is going to take aim at every single pin sort of guy. So yeah, he's one of my favorite birdie lines alongside Keith Mitchell. And I guess if I had to choose between those 2, it's tough, but I'm definitely going Mitchell because he's top 10 on tour in the category. And we've seen him on the PGA Tour this year the entire time, as opposed to Cootie. He's been on the Korn Ferry Tour, but no disrespect to Cootie. He's also a stud himself. And then we got to choose between Echeverria and Griot. And do I want to hold it against Griot and go to Echeverria? Echeverria is the slightly worse player in terms of shots gained over the last 6 months. But let's actually see what he did today. What did Echeverria shoot? He may have gone over his line too, for all I know. I'm assuming he is because he's teeing off earlier. So he shot -5. He's at T33, pretty much middle of the board. Let's see what he's been up to. Pretty damn good, if I say so myself. Consistent gainer on tour. This is why guys like him and Echeverria, I think, makes sense for that under at 68.5. I mean, all right. I hate to do that, Emiliano, but we're gonna do it. We'll make these the 2 that we take here for the community tail. So if you guys are playing for Prize Picks tomorrow, these are 2 props that I like. It's a 2.75x because of the correlation between the 2. Unlike yesterday where we had the Euro Golf prop and the PGA prop, it's 3x when you're combining 2 different golf tournaments, but you aren't getting correlation in that case. We are getting that there. That's why they're slightly bumping down the payout, which I would say is probably fair on that sort of a combination. So the 5.5 birdies, if you have guys like Dunlop at -175, Keith Mitchell would be even better value than that. And then I do want to look at the strokes lines, at least for the plus EV mark, to see where they kind of have the rest of the field. Like Olesen is the same kind of level of player as what we have in the Echeverria. Echeverria's maybe slightly worse, and that's me being like kind of mean to him. And he's at 67.5. So you would have to think that he'd be value. Again, here's all those scrub ass players at 68.5. They are at least even money on the books. So it's not like underdogs completely screwing people with the payouts, but I just have no interest in playing scrub players for anything. I've learned my lesson on that. Trust, I've been doing this for 5 years. First couple years, I trusted scrub players on lines like that, and I'll never do it again. The fall swing, the first couple of years I did fall swing props, I was unbelievable the entire year. Then I got to the fall swing and sucked for a couple of weeks because I realized all the golfers suck. It's just the worst players that we have on the PGA Tour. So you can't trust them nearly as much as what you have with your top tier players. So that's why I didn't want to play anything on underdog, because it's all the players that suck, that are all the inconsistent. You never know what the hell you're going to get out of them sort of guys. You can expect a little bit more consistency from these sort of players on Prize Picks. And that's not to say that we're going to 100% hit on this every single time, but I do like our chances on that sort of combination. So we'll take those 2. And then I did take this on the Hard Rock bet side. So if you guys are betting on the sports books, some of them will have this available, like Draftkings should have this posted. Fanduel sometimes has these head-to-heads on there too, but it's a Michael Kim versus Jaden Shaper. And this is just a quick lesson on PGA Tour versus DP World Tour. Michael Kim has been really good this year. He's been a consistent gainer. I mean, he's had a lot of top-end finishes on the PGA Tour. He's been a top 30, top 50 player on the best tour that we have in the world. Jaden Shaper, I have a absolute man crush on the guy. He's unbelievably good. I mean, he's got a ton of potential. Him, Kuvra, Perry even, John Perry coming over from the DP World Tour, they're going to be legit good PGA Tour players. However, they're going to be maybe average when they first come over, maybe even slightly below average when they first get to the PGA Tour, because even your really good high potential DP World Tour guys like a Shaper or Kuvra that I think in 5 years might be like a Robert McIntyre, right? That's what McIntyre was when he first came over. He wasn't that good at all. He's missing a whole bunch of cuts when he first came over from the DP World Tour because they're raw. They're playing at a lower level when they come over, so they're not used to playing against these studs every single week. That being said, Shaper is an above average DP World Tour player. Michael Kim is an above average PGA Tour player. There's no way in hell that Michael Kim should be at even money against James Shaper. And it goes just deeper than just the tours that they play on. Michael Kim over the last 6 months is 0.16 shots gained better per round than Jane Shaper is. And I was doing that research earlier. I was just looking at regular raw shots gained for both players over that stretch. And Kim's playing in majors. Kim's playing in signature events against Scotty Scheffler. Jane Shaper's playing against legit, like not even professionals in some of these DP World Tour events. I mean, some of like the invites that you see, especially in some of like the Middle Eastern events, and not to throw too much shade, but they give like these corporate guys, CEOs, spots in some of these fields. And that impacts the shots gained because if some scrub amateur shooting plus 40, that impacts the scoring average. And that literally impacts the actual shots gained metrics that you see for the rest of the players. Even with that, Shaper was worse by 0.16 shots. So again, Michael Kim on the world's best tour versus what is essentially like the AAA compared to the MLB in baseball is just an absolute no-brainer bet. So I bet that pretty sizably. In fact, I put a whole 2 units on that one myself because I think that this could easily be in that minus 150 to minus 200 range. So I think it's at this even money mark, by the way, and like all the major books out there. So it's not like this is like plus EV compared to the other sports books that you can play on. It's just plus EV in reality. Like there's no way in hell that those two should be at even money, especially because they're playing in the same group and they've had similar form this week. So if you guys want to see the rest of the stuff that I'm taking a Hard Rock bet, that can also be found on the Patreon page. That on top of the stuff that we'll be playing on Prize Picks for round 4 can be found over there. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support of the channel as per usual. Smash that like button if you haven't already gone around to it. Also subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content when it drops in the future. The rest of the fall swing covered, also all of 2026. So make sure you get notified that all my content goes live. And best of luck with everything that you guys are doing there for Sunday.